Body shell mounting for the X12 is a pretty tricky task which can be time-consuming and frustrating, but in this video I'll show you how to do it in the easiest possible way and as precisely as possible. So let's see what we have here. We have a clear Protoform AMR body shell, which I'm gonna mount on my brand new X12 here. And how can we mount this perfectly straight on the car? Your best friend in this type of task is the caliper, so always make sure that you have a good quality caliper to measure the distances for the mounting points on the body shell. We got a car here. I'll cut the front body post shorter so that they are only at the length they need to be to mount the body shell. And we take the body shell, put it on top of the car, and we need to try and position it in a way where it's not only centered from left to right, but also we need to pay attention to the front to rear position of the body shell. So in my particular case, I'm gonna try and mount the body shell a bit forward on the car to try and generate more front traction, try and make the car more aggressive and have more steering. Typically, I recommend starting with a neutral mounting position so that the body shell is lined up with the front wheel in the wheel well on the body shell. And this gives you the most neutral and stable handling of the car. But I'm gonna go for a bit forward to have the car more aggressive. So what do we need to look for here? We need to look for the distance between this little edge on the front hood to the center of the body post. So in this case, I normally look for a distance of 50 millimeters here. That will make the body shell sit a bit forward. Now try to line this up from left to right so that it's centered. And just use a Sharpie to mark holes here. And then I try to visually check that it's centered. It seems to be fairly centered. Maybe it needs to go a bit towards the right. No, actually it's not bad. It's pretty centered. What can we then do to double check this? I measure the distance here from the center of the hood to the hole here. So it's 19.5 on both sides, so that's perfectly symmetrical. You need to keep in mind that the body shell itself is not always symmetrical. It depends, it varies from body shell to body shell, but in this case, we're gonna try and mount this with symmetrical distances here. It can also depend on your body post, especially if they are bent from a crash or something. That might mean that your distances for your holes might be a little off. In this case, we're gonna mount it like this. We're gonna check the distance here. So it's 51. A little further here. Okay, so let's see here. Oh, I'm gonna try and mount it a bit forward, so I'm gonna make the marks for the holes just behind the holes in this case. So we use a hoodie body reamer for this task. As the hoodie small body reamer is very sharp, so be careful when you push this through the body shell, because these lightweight body shells, they're very thin and you can accidentally punch too big of a hole if you're not careful. So very gently ream holes for the posts. Step by step, don't make them too big right away, because you also want to make sure that they are lined up perfectly. So I usually just gradually make them bigger if I'm happy with where they ended up. Just gonna check the distance here again. Yeah, that's perfect. Just gonna confirm this with the body shell that I have here. Yes, that's exactly the position I want. A bit forward. I'm just gonna check that it's lined up properly. Seems to be an equal space between the right front wheel and the body and the left front wheel and the body. We can make these holes a bit bigger then. And there it fits perfectly. Then we're gonna mark the spot for the rear holes. So here again we need to try and center the body shell inside of the car inside of the body shell. Try to look for the distance between the wheels and the body shell here. And this is of course easy to do with a clear body shell. If your body shell is already painted, you can try to use an old body shell as a template to mark the holes from the previous body shell. Or you can use the aftermarket tools, which, for example, the magnets work pretty well. The magnets that you stick onto the body posts, and then you can use magnets on top of the body shell to line up the posts and make the marks for the holes. But the easiest way is to use a clear body shell. That way you have perfect way of seeing where the body posts are. Okay, so I'm checking the marks here. They're pretty much lined up. So I'm gonna go ahead and ream these holes. And again, be careful with the reamer in these lightweight body shells, so that you don't make accidentally too big holes. Okay, these holes are not all made, and I'm pretty happy with how it fits on the car. And just double check the distance here from the edge of the body to the hole. It's, yeah, almost exactly the same left and right, which is fine. But what matters is always that the car is centered inside of the body shell, which it is. Okay, that's all done. We're gonna paint this body shell now, and then we're gonna adjust the height of the body shell. So let's move on to the next step. So the body shell is now painted up in a single white color, and we can continue with the next step of the mounting process. So we put it on the car again, and we're gonna cut out the wheel wells. But before I do that, I'm gonna check the rear height of the body shell. So how do I check the rear height? I use a caliper, check from the setup board to the highest point of the body shell. I measure the height. It measures at 82 millimeters. Now double check that it's the same on both sides. Actually slightly higher on this side, 0.5 millimeters, but that's because the body shell mold is actually not completely symmetrical. So we always try to have the same height left and right. You can adjust the height of the body post to make this height perfect. But the height of the body shell is very important for the handling of the car. Basically, the higher the rear of the body shell, the more downforce you'll have. So the more overall grip you'll have, and the more roll the car will have. So on lower grip, I try to use the body shell higher in the rear for a more rake effect, so the rear higher than the front, to generate more downforce. For higher grip surfaces, where you need to free up the car and take away grip, I try to lower the rear of the body shell. So I try to, instead of 82 millimeters or 83 millimeters here, I try to go for a distance of 79 or 80 millimeters. So lower body shell in the rear for less overall grip and to free up the car. About the front lip height, this has not been trimmed now because I haven't cut it out completely yet, but so now it's only around 5 millimeters, 5.5 millimeters here. But depending on the surface that you race on, if you race on European tracks, ETS carpet for example, I try to aim for at least 6 millimeters clearance under the front lip. Sometimes 6.5, depending on the surface, if it's flat and so on. But when you race on CRC black carpet, it's important to have more clearance under the body. So usually 7.5 or 8 millimeters is necessary to not have the body shell dragging in front. But we're gonna fine tune the front lip height after we've cut out the wheel wells. So what is the easiest way to cut out the wheel wells? Usually I just take a wheel that's cut to race size, and I put it next to the wheel of the car, and I'll try to draw a circle around it. Just like that, and the same in the rear. I take a rear wheel, cut and ready to race, and I put it here, and I use this to mark a circle for the wheel. Once that's done, I grab a curved scissor to cut out this wheel shape here. You may need to adjust this a little bit later on, but this will do perfectly for now. And make sure that you have enough clearance for the wheel. And you can check the clearance by pushing this into the car like this. And that's perfect, it has clearance. You can push the body in and it doesn't get stuck on the wheel. And we'll do the same in the front. Cut out the shape that we marked with a marker. And again, we need to look for the perfect clearance here. So actually we need to cut out a little bit more here. So again, it's important that when you push the body shell in from the side, it doesn't get stuck on the wheel. I'm just gonna clean this up with a brake cleaner. And then you can make the final touch with a tool. This tool is called a sanding drum that you can use to round out these wheel wells perfectly. So it's important to not have any sharp edges here so that you don't damage the carpet or the wheels. And okay, that's perfectly made now on one side. We're just gonna repeat this process for the other side. Take the front wheel, put it against the wheel on the car. And we mark the circle around it. We'll cut this out. I'm gonna have to adjust this a little bit. Still not enough. That's more like it. Then the same for the rear. Take the rear wheel, push it against the wheel that's on the car. And we repeat the process. Cut out the rear wheel well as well. And I think that's pretty perfect, but we can still clean this up a little. And then finally, the final touch with the sanding drum. And I'm pretty happy with how those came out. Now we just need to check the front lip height. Okay, we have clearance here for all the wheels. And same on this side. Now we just need to trim this front lip so that it's not as low. I do this again with a curved scissors. And you might need to fine-tune this with a piece of sandpaper, or there's tools on the market that you can use to sand this down to make it perfect. And we can make the final touch again with the sanding drum. Okay, so let's check the front lip height now. You can check here, we have 6.5 millimeters of clearance under the front lip. Actually, even more on this side, so we might need to lower the body shell a bit on that side. It's very important to have at least 6 millimeters of clearance for racing on ETS carpet and generic carpets, and around 7.5 or 8 millimeters for CRC black carpet. You can obviously fine-tune this in the end with the height of the body posts, front and rear. But in general, this body shell is ready to hit the track because we have enough clearance in the front, the correct height in the rear, there's nothing touching the wheels, and is ready to go. We can add the little side note that the new front bumper, which is very wide, as you can see, gives very good support for the body shell in the front. So the body shell is actually resting on the front bumper here, which protects the body shell in a crash and gives it more support at high speeds, which improves the aerodynamic efficiency. So I hope that you've learned some interesting facts about body shell mounting for the X12, and you can apply these tips for mounting your next body shell.